Welcome back to the Arbitrage Run show with your host Donkey Teeth here and Kevin from Arbitrage Racing. Kevin, we have some real news this week. Aging has been launched, or actually, I guess, what do we refer to it as? Recovery rate? Is that the terminology we're going with?
I have no idea. I'm not in the intricacies of Facundo's verbiage, but yeah, dropped before our show this time rather than right after we filmed. I think our last episode got quickly dated because they announced it like a few hours after we had already filmed. So happy they could drop it ahead of it this time.
Yeah, I don't know that it was dated because what BG had stumbled into was like spot on. Even the stuff that like he was like, I don't know if this is the 250 race stuff, and it was. It was. So yeah, the announcement just came out. So we're going to talk about aging. We're going to talk about the changes to XP that just came, which are like substantial. Kind of get your takeaways on that. We're going to talk about our Maiden. We're going to do our normal promotion. We talked about it last week. So they pushed the Maiden back. We were going to do our first auction thing before this show. Like we were supposed to do it over the weekend or something like that. We were supposed to have already done it by now is what I'm trying to say. They pushed the Maiden. So the Maiden is going to start the Monday in the US, Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern time, right? I don't know. The daylight savings is killing me here.
Right. Yeah, it's tough to adjust the UTC to daylight savings. But yeah, I think it's the 11th UTC, which is the
midnight.
Night.
Yeah, midnight UTC, which would be Tuesday morning. So it'll be the night in the US when it starts. And it's only going to go for 1 day. So they kind of threw a little bit of wrench in our plans. We thought we would have, you know, at least a couple days to get our auction in. So we're going to have to squeeze it in. With your schedule, we're thinking we're going to do it like right when the Maiden starts. So I think that kind of works for the people in the US and the people in Australia. The people over in Europe might get the short end here. So if you do want to bid on any of these 6 horses we're going to auction off, maybe you want to put it in overnight and you can just kind of watch the show back for entertainment. See if you get it. Even if you don't get it, you get to see what that horse turned out as, right?
Yeah, it's always exciting. And yeah, maybe the bid you put in, there's no guarantee it's going to get outbid during the show. So it's very possible that we accept the bid, it goes to your stable, it runs overnight, and you can catch up as if you're watching it live.
Yeah, it should be fun. So I guess to reiterate, for anybody that hasn't, that didn't catch it on the last show, we're going to do our first Maiden auction. We're setting up a custom Griffin. Zed's going to hopefully set that up for us. And we're going to start the stream at 8 p.m. Eastern time on Monday is our plan. And we'll be accepting bids on these 6 horses during the stream. And no, did we say we were going to start? Because we want to run it at 9 p.m. Eastern, right? You tell me what we're doing, Kevin.
Let's do 8 o'clock stream, right? We're accepting bids, now through that point. And then we're going to kind of stagger off their ending auction time every 5 minutes or so. So we'll have a nice live view of who's buying what. And then at 8:45, we'll have the custom race run of those 6 horses running in a Griffin. And then, yeah, so they'll go from there. You'll obviously don't want to spoil your teaser here, but there's a nice hefty prize for the winner of that.
Yeah, I don't know that you're spoiling it because we talked about it on last week's show, but the Ready, Set, Boom, Delicious Irony Z2 Philly is going to be the prize. So, yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Let me just pull up. We've got a list created here that I'll tweet out as well when I post the show on Twitter. But yeah, here are the 6 horses. So this first one up top is the prize. So the winner of this custom race, whoever buys that horse during the auction segment of the show, and we're not going to like do like, you know, full auctioneer shill type thing. We're just going to accept bids during the show and maybe talk a little bit about the horses and where we think they might land and kind of get your idea of comps. But whoever bought that horse that ends up winning that 6-gate Griffin custom race will get this Z2 Legendary Filly as a prize. And it's Ready, Set, Boom and Delicious Irony. And I guess since it wasn't working last week, we can show these 6 real quick. So these are the 6 horses we're going to be auctioning. Again, bidding is open right now if you want to just place a placeholder bid or your best bid, whatever, you know, whatever you want to do. But Triumph for Hours Grandeur Plan is this first one. And then we kind of went over these on last week's show. So I'll just pull them up real quick. Death in June Grandeur Plan. This one is actually, Kevin, this was the pairing that won us like $2,500 in that last Maiden. So
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe,
Arrival, is that the
or
offspring?
that's Arrival. Yes, Arrival is the sibling to this one. It's a filly as well, so that should be a fun pairing. Then this was the last Grandeur Plan one. This is Volatile Artist and Grandeur Plan, so we should have 3. And again, this is going to run at 2,000 meters because these other 3 horses that we are going to auction are coming more in the mid funnel. Star Phantom Strider Head. You can kind of guess the blood that's coming into this. Actually, it's got Star Strider on both sides,
Yeah.
Third Head on one side, Phantom Pacer on the other side. And these were 2.0 breeds. Those horses were all kind of great horses. And then the other 2 Star Phantoms, Too Much Noise, really nice variants, legendary that we got at the top of C2. And the last one was who? O-Head and Star Phantom, which is O'Neill and Third Head on this side, Star Strider and Phantom Pacer on this side. So that's what we're doing. I think that's enough about that, right, Kevin?
Yep, I think so. And that, yeah, I mean, the bonus is, yeah, you can run that Z2 in the Maiden as well. We're doing it at a time where you'll still have basically the full allotment of time to run your 5 races for the Maiden. So we'll try to align the timing to work. Hopefully it's something we can do going forward for all the Maidens, or some sort of this, maybe once a month. And the good thing about auctions is, like, fair market value is fair market value, right? So you're only bidding against each other. So it's very possible if, like, sentiment's at an all-time low, you might get a heck of a deal, especially when you have the overlay of that prize. So we might lose our shirts here, Donkey, but it'll be fun regardless.
Yeah, I mean, we can't lose too bad. And we get the fun factor. So Twitch, that's where we're going to be doing it. It's going to be a Twitch live stream. Here's the address. I wasn't able to really pull it up last week, but twitch.tv/Arbitrage.Run. Go ahead and subscribe there. Follow us, and you'll get a notification once we start live streaming if you've got notifications turned on. But yeah, you mentioned sentiment being at an all-time low. I agree. I was messaging you about it earlier. Like, every chat that we're in, everybody is just like so down on Zed. I feel like we're going through another one of those like communication lulls too, where it's just like nothing is happening, and it's just this is the Zed cycle, and it's gotten like to the point where, yeah, it feels like it is worse than ever. But now we got this aging announcement, and things are starting to shift. So maybe we turn a corner here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And this, as soon as they announced, I don't know, maybe a month or 2 ago, that they weren't doing tournaments anymore, at least like funded tournaments, I mean, you could see the writing on the wall that for the period where they're doing this transition into aging and not free rolling as many tournaments, there's just really just the Maiden that they reinvest, that you knew it was going to die a little bit. You just hope that it would be revivable at the end. And I think good news is we're getting close to the point where we have some next steps in place. XP, I will touch on a little bit, has been expedited. I think tournaments, they mentioned paid tournaments are coming back in the most recent announcement. I don't know if that's after the Maiden in a couple of weeks, but I would expect that to be in the next 1 to 2 weeks. So a lot of that will bring a lot of the fun factor and destroy some of the grind that is just a little tedious at times of paid racing.
Yeah, and the depression of stagnation, I think, was one way to put it.
Yeah, we were in an XP system, right, where you were just racing a ton, and you were like, yes, there was XP, yes, you were leveling, but it was so slow. It's like you didn't even feel any kind of positivity when you like got to level up, because you're like, all right, it's just one level, and my next one will come in a week or even more. So like, it wasn't really the sense of progression. Whereas at least now that I 10x the speed roughly, you'll get that satisfaction and feel the progression quicker.
Yeah. So the other thing that I kind of had on the docket for this show, before we do dive in on the aging update and the XP, was related to this, the negativity, the all-time lows of sentiment, and kind of wanted to pick your brain on how you think, I guess, tying it back into, because we both listened to Dan Shan Spaces that was last night, that was Tuesday night, and we're recording this on Wednesday in the US. And, he had some people on, Archibald and Zerga, that are very unhappy with the direction of Zed, and they're not the only ones. And so, I mean, it was an interesting conversation, and you and I had this conversation recently, like, about how Zed can reach the Zed that we kind of always envisioned, and if that's still possible. I'm a little bit more optimistic than you for sure, which, is no surprise to anybody, right? But you're smarter than me, so I wanted to just have the discussion on what you think needs to happen in order for ZED to reach, the way you put it, a top 10% outcome for us to get the high end prices back. So just kind of wanted to tease that conversation. We'll get back to that after we got to talk about aging here first. So that sound good?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, so this aging announcement came out, and in this announcement, it also says that the XP rate has changed. Now, the rate didn't change, right, Kevin? They changed the amount of XP that we need to accumulate to reach the next level, right?
Yeah, the amount you get per raise per outcome is the same by my eye, at least. And then they just basically cut down the amount of XP, like you said, that you need to progress.
Yeah, so they say that it's going to allow a better balance of progression within varying recovery rate tiers. So recovery rate, aging, kind of interchangeable here. So I guess the first thing that we noticed with that is that some of these horses, especially the ones that were really high up in level in class 1, because what did we need, like 30,000 XP to level up RSB 1 prior to this update? So he had accumulated like 20,000, and it was just sitting there. They run this update. We run one race with RSB, and he goes up 10 levels, right?
Yeah, that was running good. I think it was like, you can look at ZSum and it shows where you are in your XP progression. So Ready Set Boom was level 628, needed 33,800 XP to go to 629. We were at 33,079. So we were like one race away from finally getting the 34,000 it needed. But now that 33,000 went to the new system and it leveled instantly from 628 to 638.
Yeah. And then I think there were a lot of those, especially above 600. And then there were, the handful that just happened to have passed the level and get like totally shafted by this.
Yeah.
This
We
change.
had enough where we were on both sides of the coin. I think Triumph had like just hit 607. Whereas Princess of Power they're always right next to each other, and Princess of Power is still at 606, and now Pop is up at 611. And I know some of the class 2 ones were similar, so it's just, who knew that was coming? But had to get a little lucky. Some luck, some unluck, but it balances out for the most part.
Yeah, and it almost was like a random rebalancer of like the past 5 months of like grind, right? Is like we said that the people that were getting the full grind, and they were putting the work in, but it's almost like an unfair advantage, right? And some of that like got flipped around. I don't think that it was really intended. I don't know if it was fair, but what's fair?
It's just one of those things. I don't know why they did it that way. It just like, it's not a huge deal, but it's like definitely not the best way to do it. So it's just like another one of those frustrating like why type questions. My guess is it was something on the technical side that it was just easier to roll it out this way, and they forecasted that it would all come out in the wash eventually. But I do feel bad for like the one-on-one type horses where like level means a ton when it comes to that. When there's no variance, like it is almost entirely level is super correlated with your win rate in those one-on-ones. So if a horse had like grinded really hard to be the top 1,800 in the game, and now they just happen to just level up to that new level, and a horse that is 4 levels back, which is big in that environment, didn't and got lucky and passed it, like that doesn't feel right either. So it doesn't matter as much for our types of horses with variance, but because they can win even at a level disadvantage. But one-on-one, it means a lot.
For sure. And also, people had like 5 levels left in the bracket, whether it was 550 to 575 or 575 to 600, and looking forward to finally being profitable, right? And then boom, you're just outside of it now because you leveled up 6. So it's like both sides of the coin. Maybe you got it when you didn't want it, and you didn't get it where you did want it. And it's like, well, I guess.
I think I saw the wavelength example was very similar to that. I think it went like 596 to 601. Evergreen Gates for us, I mean, don't feel too bad for her, but went from like 594 to 600, I think, on the nose. So similar stuff happening there, but yeah, it happens.
I guess on the other side of the coin, right, leveling is going to be a lot quicker now, right? So like RSB needed 3,000 to get the next level. So it's really going to be a game changer. Of course, those horses that are now ahead are going to level just as fast, right? So,
yeah,
but I guess theoretically they're going to hit a point in the curve, right, where it just like grinds to a halt. You would think, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen the curve. BG probably has this out there somewhere. I don't know if we know. Do we know the curve?
I don't think we can know until they get there, right?
Extrapolate it out based off the trends. Yeah. So I mean, in theory, yeah, you would have areas where it just decelerates so much that they do get caught a little bit. So I'll be curious to see where that is, and that'll be interesting to play out. But everything should happen much faster, and obviously once you get to 700, that's going to be a totally different game.
Well, and it also depends if those horses that are in the lead decide to, max out to push or be a little more selective, knowing that, you've only got 1,250 races now until you're fully aged, and then get 8 races a month.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's more strategy, and more strategy is good.
Yep, absolutely. It's the game was too solved for too long. So I like adding new variables. I wish we'd do it more often, as long as they're like nice, balanced variables.
Yeah. So anything you want to talk about on aging in particular, or recovery rate in particular, and the XP change?
I've only mentioned it last time. I think the balance of it, to me at least, was about what expected, or like what I would deem as a nice middle ground. I know a lot of people, you can tell it's balanced when you have Zedders complaining equally loud on both sides. Like nobody's ever really that happy, but when you have the same amount of noise coming from each side, at least you can feel like it is a middle ground. And I think this hit that, and a lot of it will take some adjustment, where 250 races feels super minimal. Like it feels like not a lot of racing, not a lot of earnings, and not a lot of time to progress. But when you realize how much XP you can actually gain in those 250 races, and where, like, how fast that enables you to progress up the level hierarchy, I think it feels like a better number. So to me, like the 10x rate of progressing that much faster feels about right. What's going to get interesting is for like lower class horses that have the ability to class up. What are they going to do to incentivize you to class up? I think there's still a ton you can layer on. We've talked about it in the past. One being like drop your recovery rate tier as an incentive. So like, yeah, I just wasted 250 races to go from the bottom of class 2 to class 1, or to the top. But now if you go to class 1, I'll let you race 8 times a day again. That just be an easy, no cost way to incentivize classing up. But seeing those types of horses invest in high dollar, lower class races, or as high as they go, to get to the max as fast as they can, and then go to class 2, and then maybe even in the class 1, it'll be interesting to see the ability. Because in the past, like that was not a possibility with the slower XP grind. There just weren't enough races in the day to do that. You're going to see all that speeding up. So it'll be interesting to see like our first class 3 beast kind of do the progression and become a star on the C1 stage.
Yeah. Well, they can't unless they were Genesis right now. So hopefully that Evo up option is coming, as we've all kind of speculated, and hopefully that age up incentive. Like we need all kinds of incentives. I think that's part of the conversation of fixing Zed has to be around getting the right incentives, which we've always known, and we've known that they're broke. They've been broken since the start of time, right? Since downclassing, and then this new system gets launched, and there's really, what's the point, right? What's the point in leveling up? And now we can level up really fast, and potentially coming soon, right? Buy and sell XP. But like, what's the point in buying XP if it's worse to be like higher? You just race against the same segment of really tough horses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, not to spoil how we're going to fix things or propose to fix things. That's I think a key component is not having so many segments that you're always racing against identical horses, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're almost on that conversation. It really ties into all of this stuff. Like you said, there's people that think that the rate of leveling now is too fast, and you kind of address that. I think it is too fast if there aren't other changes coming, right? Because like we talked about base ability being like severely devalued in breeding 3.0, right? Like you're giving it away, of course, supply demand, like it's no longer a rare trait, right? And so by nature, the value of it goes down. And then because of how the breeding algorithm works, you know, you're also giving it away on two ends, right? We said this a bunch of times to horses. Like two bad Genesis horses have a floor of what that outcome is going to be. So now we're also giving it away really fast and leveling right, and potentially you can buy and sell it. So it's like this is like the age of dead base ability, right?
Yeah, it truly is. That was, aside from the distance preferences, that was the ability, especially on the breed side, that got hit the hardest with this update.
So how do we approach that? You know, I gotta assume that the team realizes that this is overboard. You know, I know that we can't like keep going back to whatever, a year, 14 months ago when Zed dropped these Z1s for $30,000. Like that's kind of in the past, but also like there's still something to that, right? Like you kind of got to stand by, to a certain degree at least, what makes these horses special, which is base ability, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was like a foundational aspect of the game, right? Like there's certain like core competencies of a game, right? You can deviate from, you can put your own flavor on, but that was like the cornerstone of the game was these Nakamoto Genesis and going all the way down the line as being like premium assets. They were priced accordingly. Price is what it is, but like the hierarchy of it and how much more they're priced up, I think can still be like scalable in terms of value, right? And what they've done right now is there are very many cases where I would rather have a Buterin than a Nakamoto for breeding purposes. Like it's not even that close, really. Like the Buterins had more room in their pie to get variance because they didn't have as much base ability, at least on average. And now we've made variance really valuable and totally nuked the value of base ability. So yes, they still have its base ability, but it doesn't have any value in the current meta. So by proxy, you have totally nuked the value of the hierarchy to where, like, what does Bloodline even mean now? You get a slightly faster progression. Like it's mostly meaningless at this point.
And slightly higher starting level, right? Which we shouldn't totally discount, right? We should be, you know, at least present all the facts. Like, yeah, you start with a base ability is a key factor in those Genesis Nakamotos, starting with the higher starting level, and they're full starting with the higher starting level, right?
Right, and I think that's where if they can fix the racing side of things and have like the breeding match, that they could easily reassign the value. I don't think it's a lost cause at all. I just think we're imbalanced in the current meta with a lot of the changes they made around bracketing and 25 bands, the class system, and like 3.0 having such a low outcome, relatively speaking, in terms of outputting the starting level of the offspring. Like there's just no scenario where like your best outcome as a Nakamoto pair, right, is probably a super breed and you get like level 580. Like what does 580 do for you right now that 480 doesn't? Like some would argue in the current balance that 480 is better because then you're closer to the top of your class and then you can farm at 500 for a long time. Whereas you're currently, you're at 580, you're going to be disadvantaged facing 576 to 600s. And then you're in no man's land at 601 where you're going to face horses who now are going to be hitting 700 even faster. So that gap is just going to get wider and wider. So like your best outcome of anything right now, breeding wise with 3.0, and I think its biggest flaw is some potential advantage in a maiden that is a one day event right now, and then you just don't have value longer term, or you're gonna have to invest and, I mean, in the current system, lose money to get that thing leveled up to be competitive. Or I know we're building in like XP tournaments, which I think is a great idea to have a bridge from like newborn horse who doesn't really have value racing against the more mature horses to getting them to that level. Because right now there's just not, like, you have to lose money to level up effectively.
Yeah, well, you know, it's gonna be a lot less painful now with the smaller bands. Like C2, we didn't even talk about, but like it was so difficult to get from 490 for any horses from 490 to 500 in C2. And it's like 3,000 now. It's like 3,000 XP to get from 498 to 499 or something like that. This is not that hard. So if you want to, that's the problem, is we don't want to. And then, you know, the other issue with these high base ability Genesis Nakamotos that are supposed to be the cornerstones of the game, right? Even if you hit the best possible breed, like you're saying, you hit a super breed, you get this 580. If you have this high base ability horse, it's not going to have, by nature, like 99% of them don't have much distance preference or variance because of how like they were created by the initial game designers. It's like they had this pie and you could have a certain amount, maximum amount of all three traits, right? And if you got a lot of base ability, there just wasn't that much left for these other traits. So you breed them and you can't get the most valuable trait variance. And so like you're saying, you get a 480 horse, probably has some higher degree of variance than these horses coming from these high base ability Genesis Nakamotos that were, again, sold for $30,000. Don't want to keep harping on that, right? But they're the cornerstones of the game. And now they can level up really fast and get to that 580 level and catch up and be much better horses. So like, what's the solution here, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, there's not an easy one. I don't think anybody has put one out there that is like the perfect solution, especially with the direction that the team has gone. I think there's some elements that they've woven in now that are going to at least start steering the ship in the right direction. I think aging is a big one where you can at least like get these unbeatable horses off the track a bit. I think making progression quicker will help the feedback loop a bit. And then I love the idea of these XP tournaments to where you don't have to lose money to level your horse at a good speed, especially now that there is aging. So I think all of those are great steps in the right direction. To me, like still the big missing loop is this is supposed to be like a breeding game in a lot of aspects, right? And like the feedback loop on breeding is just so atrocious right now. Like you breed for a maiden and that's all the expected value effectively. Like there's so many horses. I know we're not necessarily representative of everybody, but I bet a lot of people feel the way where you kind of race this horse, you get excited about it, you run the maiden, and then you don't touch the horse for like, I mean, ever again, effectively. Whereas in the past, this wasn't the case because you could actually spit out a quality horse that is competitive in a certain class. And like you can get that in C2, C3, C4 right now, but you can't get that in class 1. So there's no like true element of breeding a beast. Like it's just not a thing right now. So I think that I don't know the solution on it. It feels like some combination of expanding the amount of time you can race against like younger horses. So where you actually get the benefit of having that extremely good relative outcome for more than just a maiden. I think that would help. I think obviously increasing the other option is to go back to more of like a 2.0 breeding model where base ability matters a lot more in starting level. And instead of starting at 520 in a good outcome, you have these like Felicity forces that start at 590. That would help soften the blow a bit. And then you have a super breed that layers on top of that and boom, it's a 650. I think that would help a little bit, but there's no upside outcome in breeding at all right now. It's basically get lucky, land at top of class, get lucky, win a maiden, and that's your income. That's the value of the horse.
Right. I guess what's the argument against creating more upside in breeding now that, let's step back, right? Like I don't want to sound overly critical. I never want to sound overly critical, right? Like I think we agree that getting aging out as fast as possible was the #1 priority. When everybody's like outraged about breeding 3.0, like it's like, well, I mean, yeah, I'd like to see it tweaked too. I don't love it either. There's definitely some things that I would immediately change. But if you've got limited resources, right, top priority had to be getting this full game loop out, aging, and get the XP dialed in now that aging's here, and then layer on a token sync that actually makes the ecosystem, you know, run smoothly and have these XP NFTs and this market of trading XP, right? Like those should be the top priorities to get this foundation of a game that actually works and is fun, right?
Yeah, that's how you get it playable, and you can actually like start to see a future of how the game loop will work. And then yeah, it's really like fine tuning from there
And
around
fixed breeding, right?
breeding, right? Which is a huge undertaking. I understand, like I just assume like every time they touch breeding, it takes a long time. I know they're short on resources. So yeah, get the core game loop secure, and then you can refine the the valuations of things. But that also makes it really hard to like, how do you value things right now with so much uncertainty?
Well,
We don't
it's
have a
just
roadmap.
worthless. Everybody thinks
Like,
everything's worthless.
exactly. Yeah. So that should bode well for our auction, for the people buying there. But yeah, I mean, seriously, it's a conundrum they've put themselves in with like limited resources. But I do agree, like from a allocation standpoint with what they have, they were already so far down the path of aging and XP. Like they needed to get that to the finish line before leaving another like half finished project and like going to something else. So I think they're heading in the right direction there. Now it's just like, what is their next step going to be? That's where I'm super curious, and I think a lot of people are.
Well, yeah, I think the XP NFTs have to be next, right? You got to get that's the next thing. Like
I loop that with this. That's like the core that goes hand in hand with aging and with this new XP stuff. That's how we get like the multi-economy style system.
Yeah, a game that really does work and can scale and has a ton of potential, even though a lot of people don't see the potential for, this lower tier market that has people playing for, 50 cents and, $3 horses in it. That can exist. It's really tough needle to thread, having that and having, $20, $30, $40,000 horses. Definitely not an easy thing to do. Not saying that, but I think it is possible. And a lot of people don't. So back to the conversation, I guess Kevin got a little bit off track. I just wanted to say, like, I don't want to come across as like this needs to happen today. And I've kind of understood why there is hesitancy to make changes. Let's, see what everything looks like, and why make a change before you know what the actual game looks like in practice, right? When then maybe you need to go, like something you didn't realize comes up and it's like, oh, now we're going to need to change breeding again, right? So that said, now that it's in place, right, it's like breeding in our eyes should be the next piece, dialing that in. Like, I guess before aging was in place, you don't want breeding upside. You don't want too much breeding upside because it kind of like exacerbates the problem of 1.0s to a certain degree, right? Like there's no way to age them out and they're just killing everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now that it's here, it can be addressed, right?
It makes a lot of sense to have that, because you've effectively capped the value of horses on the racetrack, right? So anything you do to boost the value or the initial skill of a newly born horse, like it won't hurt them as much. And then it actually, if you increase the value or increase like the top outcome of breeding, then those horses who have their traits passing down from the best horses, their value will go from racetrack to the breeding barn, right? So it actually is a weird way to kind of loop value back to those types. And the other thing with like how breeding is designed, it at least correlates pretty well, like outcome wise, to starting level, which is the one thing you lose like very, very quickly in terms of this progression system, because you level so fast. It doesn't matter like if RSB started at 612 and I don't know what's like Loves a Fantasy for us, like started at 520, right? When they both reach 700, they're going to be actually fairly comparable horses. But breeding wise, you're going to get a much better outcome with that 612 starting. And if they fix that to like actually bring back an upside breeding scenario, then RSB is a premium horse again, right? And that's just an example for us. I think you're going to quickly lose the initial value of horses if we keep this like watered down breeding system and all these horses are level 700.
Agreed. And I guess that ties back into, the solution that I'm just going to, broken record here, keep saying, like, and actually ZSIM really kind of validated my thoughts that we're not grounded in data at all. Just like, it's just like, I know what's fun and I know what's not fun. And I know that when I have two of the best legendaries in the game and I breed them together, I don't feel like I should be getting a 420. I feel like should be getting a class 1 horse. And that's sorry.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. Like that doesn't feel right. And the option I think they can go if they are just dead set on like keeping 3.0 as it is, at least in the short term. They have the breeding outcomes so tiered off by legendary has a very different range of outcomes than exclusive has a very different range of outcomes than elite. So why are we racing in these like weird classes that are just arbitrary cutoffs? Like why not have a system where you reward like the best exclusives racing against other exclusives? So suddenly that like that top end outcome, at least from the exclusive range that they've created, is rewarded. Because right now we find ourselves like using the ZEDs tool to try to target like a top of a class, but that is under no circumstance normally trying to pair our best legendary with our other best legendary, because that's going to create like a 460. Now we'd rather have our best legendary paired with a C4 legendary, because that's going to get you a 390. These arbitrary cutoffs just make no sense and like actually take away from the fun of like breeding your best horses together. If you had just exclusive versus exclusive and the 460 was better than a 390 because they're racing against each other, then that's a mode that would actually be fun and incentivize some more strategic top end breeding.
Agreed. And so what I was saying about ZSIM, Kevin, and we talked about this a little bit, is what he pointed out with population collapse in class 1, with how few horses are being bred in and aging imminent, right? Like, can you kind of give your cliff notes of what he was saying?
I don't remember the specifics on it, but I do know, like you saw it in the last Maiden, right? Like they had a very like small criteria to have the C1 Maiden run. It was like, I don't know if it was it 12 horses, was it 24
36 maybe?
36 maybe, yeah, it was something like that. And they couldn't even fill it with a multi-week like time. And it's just strictly because the outcomes of breeds don't ever end up in C1, especially when you have these like sprinter DP types. Or even like, I think marathon run, one of them didn't run. But when you have
marathon
DP,
and sprint, neither of them did.
Yeah, because they have distance preference, which is taken away, and it results in like it's really hard to have a specialized horse bred that lands in class 1. You can get mids that pop in there more often, but otherwise you need like almost like an RSB style to reliably get put into class 1. So I think that was an example of like, it's just the bar is super high. And then what were you saying ZSIM said about like a population collapse? I imagine they're very related.
Yeah. So as aging kicks into effect, at the rate that new horses are coming into C1, the rates shift to the point that population will collapse over time.
Yeah.
So something needs to change. And even if they scaled it up, double the number of horses landing in class 1, he was still kind of concerned about this.
I mean, I can see that too. You're going to have that, and you're also going to have, once again, these new horses that are like, you can give them their safe space, I guess, like 501 to 525. And if they'll keep those segments up to like 575, that's fine. But the moment they hit outside of that safe space and you have horses that are 700, and yeah, they're going to be aged a little bit, but like you're still going to be running like whatever, a full time a month. And if there's enough of these, the gap between 576 and 700 is like pretty insurmountable at times for certain types of horses. Like a 1v1 horse would, I don't know the numbers, but probably lose 3/4 of the time if they were 576 facing their mirror image at 700. So that makes it super difficult to have that. And maybe you use the free tournaments to get your level up. But like he's saying, the supply of the horses starting from the bottom and moving their way up is just going to be so much lower than the top end. And that's going to make for a really interesting case.
Now, I guess on the flip side, Kevin, is there a case to be made that if they do make class 1 like some dreams incentivized scenario and layer on like huge prize pools, overlays, maybe ZED token incentives for classing up and tournaments, and really make it special and glamorous, and now it's really difficult to breed into relative to the other classes, and maybe you get this Evo up token or something that you can somehow win or earn in lower classes, does it actually make this work? And is there potentially like a future where, like you're talking about bringing upside back as kind of being the key to Zed's success and breeding value and horse values in general, right? Breeding upside back. Is there a case that I'm just kind of hearing like souls vanish in my head? Maybe you want the lower level horse that has the right mix of traits so that you can earn more for a longer duration in those lower levels. And maybe class one is like so incentivized that having that small supply and that, really difficult bar to get into class one starts to boost up the value of Genesis Nakamoto's.
I mean, it's possible that, yeah, they would need to align incentives to basically subsidize the top end with maybe like a rake in lower classes, or some kind of overlay that they're using from the treasury to incentivize being at the top to where it actually makes you want to be at the top. But I mean, you're exactly right. And I think our most recent purchase yesterday actually was a horse named Sense that we got fairly cheap. But it's a super high variance horse near the top of class 3. And our exact logic in buying it was like, well, it's already at the top of class 3. So we know, relatively speaking, it's going to race well against its peers. And then it's, I think, a legendary, so it can go up to 500. So if they start to incentivize classing up, there's not that much difference if you have the right traits between like a 420 in class 2 and a 500. Like the gap, I think they said, is like less than 25 levels in class 1, right? From bottom of class 2 to top of class 2. So then you suddenly have this nice runway all the way through class 2 as well for that horse. And then if they have Evo tokens we can layer on, then you kind of get the benefit of starting class 1 and segmenting up. So that was our logic in our most recent purchases. Believe it or not, purchases are still happening. But that's exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, and if you get that incentive that pretty much anybody that you talk to in Zed thinks is a no-brainer, right? Of losing some age on leveling up, then actually it becomes a good thing, right? To breed into class 2 with variance with the right mix of traits.
Yeah,
you get profitability all that way, and then
and that's where you give like Facundo says, it's a game of interesting choices. So like that gives you the choice of, do you want to play the game like that, be more of like the grinding way and get value, and maybe that would give value to some of these lower level Genesis, or do you want to go for the top end if there's an upside scenario too that just like skips all that and you can just go ahead and breed a 625 or a 650, and that's just going to print money from the get-go with a good outcome. Like there's just different opportunities there. Right now, there's not interesting choices at all breeding. It's like I have to awkwardly play this game and try to hit and get lucky hitting the top of a class that's just a random level cutoff.
Yeah. I mean, the more we discuss it, the more I get back into my positive mindset that like we're stuck in the trees here, and there's so much negative sentiment around us that it's like hitting us from all sides. We can only see this game in front of us that's half of a game. Incentives are broken. Everybody knows it. The team knows it, and of course, there's no profitability. There's no stimulation going on in this economy. The tournaments have been turned off. So it's like everything seems dire. And of course, horse values are just going to tank until something changes, until there's profitability. Like nobody wants to breed because there's no profitability outside of maidens. Okay, they're going to breed for this maiden, right? But outside of that, it's like the spigot gets turned off. So there's just so many different ways to change the game once you get this foundation in place. And if there's money to be made, then breeding value goes up. And I don't know. I just don't think that the tweaks need to be like that excessive. And I don't know what excessive is, right? I don't know how difficult like my ideas are of like giving base ability a variance boost in the breeding algorithm. I don't know if that's like tear it all down kind of project, or like just change one piece of code. Probably not that, but I don't know. I don't think we're that far off. Maybe I'm delusional here, Kevin. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, like
I'm delusional, or yeah.
No comment. But like with there's just there are easier ways to do things, like not to oversimplify, but to go back to even like breeding 2.0, I think a lot of this was built to bring more of the skill back into breeding. I think they've definitely done that, where you can't just smash horses together and hope you get lucky with the lotto. So there's some skill back, but that true upside scenario just isn't there. And like 2.0 had a more upside scenario than 3.0, undeniably. And even with 2.0, the original vision was to have these catalysts where you would incentivize actions, I think, with like older horses to burn or retire or whatever, and you get breeding incentives on top of that, which would then allow you to, I'm kind of speculating what they were, I don't know if we ever really knew, but you could then assign them to a breed and the outcome would be juice as a result. Things like that, where you wouldn't have to totally revamp 3.0. You could just align incentives and provide rewards in a way that provide an upside outcome outside of the super breed, which, I mean, is a great idea. I don't think it's been applied the best way. It seems way too rare. Like we're seeing what, 1 out of, I don't know, 800 now. It's super rare, which doesn't seem frequent enough. And the impact and how good they actually are is underwhelming as well, at least through the first, whatever, 30 of them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I also wonder, like, is the upside case there now that we can level faster? Like, we probably have some really good horses in our stable just sitting around that, like, we didn't want to spend the time grinding up from these lower levels that have a really nice mix of, you know, variance and distance preference that could be monsters, right? Once they get up into the high 600s, 700s. So, like, the upside, it could be there. And if XP ends up being cheap and we can just buy a pile of it and boom, this horse is up there to start, like, maybe the upside case is there.
Yeah. I mean, that's where the path, you need the path from bottom of class, especially class 1, to near the top of class to at least be competitive, to not be a total ETH sink like it is right now. Right. So we mentioned free XP tourneys. Boosted that is a great way to do it. You can use some of your aging on that, layering on some Vault XP, I think would be a good idea as well. But right now it just feels like this massive insurmountable hole because it just takes such an investment that it's not even worth it, because then you get up to the top and almost all of your aging's gone and you're never going to make that investment back. So I think bridging that gap will help a lot.
And there's still only one way to play the game, which has been the issue for eternity. I guess you could make the argument that, yeah, you could play it for stability too and go for like 1v1s and double ups and stuff like that. But there's not many different paths and choices in the game still. And I think,
it's like there's two ways. There's Zed and then there's like Dan Chan. So you have to be on Dan Chan's tournament to get the actual like variety. So shout out to him. There's a lot of fun happening over there. But yeah, it feels like sometimes like, why am I leveling up just to race against more horses that are leveling up at the same speed?
Better. Yeah.
Throwing money back and forth. There hasn't been, like, unfortunately, like, for there to be winners in a game, there has to be losers, right? And I think Zed's gotten in the mindset of like, all right, we're going to lessen how many people are losers. And as a result, they've just nuked the top end and there's not a ton of winners. And like, don't get me wrong, like there's still a lot of stables making money, but there's not like the big outcome tournament that I think we used to have, like the Netflix race, right? Like Sonny won, like they said on Dan Chan's show, like 45 grand in a single race. Like there were people investing in horses there. They were kind of doing shares of like get exposure. So it doesn't have to be like one stable going in for this high dollar thing. And there was massive overlay. I know that's way in the past at this point, but like that was such a fun event. We don't have any of that.
Yeah, well, and I keep saying, like, the way that you get that is growing the user base. Create a fun game first that works, that's scalable, get a bunch of people playing it, and then things are going to happen, right? People, like, attention is going to come in, money's going to come in, more people are. I mean, it's incredible how much building via third parties has already happened in Zed with how little it is, right? And imagine if things, 20x, 50x, like, my God, the upside is incredible because the economy is going to have this flood of resources and financial resources coming in, and the profitability like could be insane, like in the real world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that's the top 10% outcome that you're talking about that you think is, not super likely, but I'm an optimist.
I mean, yeah, it's one of those things we talk about, like the asymmetric upside. Maybe it's not as asymmetric as it was, but yeah, you have a 10% outcome where, yeah, it all comes flowing back, and then the other 90% is actually like a negative outcome. But yeah, I like what you're saying about like the fun And there's just so much Zed can do that they haven't done around fun, like just starting with communications. Like there's elements where you can see they've like had meetings about it and like tried to like, hey, let's have this community spotlight every week and throw it in our Discord. But like the Zed like site itself is so bad in terms of communication. Like, why do they not have a leaderboard of any sort on the Zed side? Like you could have level, you could have like add some glory to like actually being good or like winning something big aside from a random post in a Discord. Like how is that not on the site? I just blows my mind. So like that's low hanging fruit if they ever get the resources and ability to do it. Just like bring any kind of glory to the game.
Yeah, I mean, like, and if you look at, we're talking about the Rainmakers leaderboards and stuff like. I guess I should say first, there's opportunity cost everywhere, and that's what Facundo has always said. It's like they want to do everything all at once, right? And yeah, I mean, you go in all these different directions, nothing gets done. At least we got aging out now. But yeah, we were talking about the Rainmakers leaderboard yesterday, and like that kind of principle of like earning points for doing all of these different things and then having like monthly payouts or weekly payouts on Rainmakers. And then there's like the Masters is this week for golf Rainmakers for anybody that's familiar with it. And there's a snapshot after the Masters, and whatever you got in your wallet, they got all these like credits and stuff that you can get for it. And then you get paid out, based on where you land in the leaderboard. So like that stuff's going to be coming. It's got to be coming to Zed. It's just, resources are limited, and it feels like there's no light at times, but I think there's a lot to be optimistic about, Kevin.
And I think that's what frustrates a lot of people is like they see there's like so many outs to where like the game becomes all we hoped it would be, right? And then there's times where it takes some wrong turns or like has these like dumb errors. But we all see the promise. That's what kind of drew us in initially. And the lack of having like no roadmap also makes it difficult because we truly like I don't really know the vision past adding in XP tokens, right? I don't know if anybody does. So it's hard to invest in like getting excited in a project where you just have no idea what the vision is. And we are probably as plugged in as anybody in the community, and we don't really know past 2 weeks from now. So that's, I think, where all this frustration is stemming from.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we do know that the potential to like own our own tracks or whatever has been discussed by Facundo, and that type of handing it over to the community is still, I mean, very fun. Anyway, wrap it up here. I guess final message. They're marketing, and there's new players coming in, and we see they've got like the paid influencers and stuff talking about Zed. Let's try to be welcoming to the new players and help them learn the game and not look like a bunch of classless shitheads complaining about everything all the time, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like aside from the crypto boom where everybody was winning, like this is one of the better times to like come in to the game as a new user, right? You can lend a horse and like basically learn the game that way, maybe make some bucks. I know there's a ton of good horses there sitting on the sideline where if you learn the game running freeze, that you can make a few bucks in paids with that, and then you can kind of build your stable that way. Like one of the advantages of the current setup where there's not a huge top end is that there's a much lower bar from the bottom end in terms of entering the game and being successful. So great time to join. If any new users stumbled upon our show and kind of, I guess,
made it this far, I may do a little bit of beginner content. We'll see if I got some time. I may start putting some stuff out on the channel just to kind of contribute to that end, and maybe bring some new people into our show. But Kevin, it was a blast. We went over some stuff. If anybody's got any feedback, maybe we can circle back on some of this stuff because it was total stream of consciousness on this show. But I always enjoy it. Guys, show up to our auction Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern on Twitch, and follow Kevin out on Twitter at Arbitrage Racing, no G. I'm at ZED Diamond Hands. Give our show a like, subscribe, please. We appreciate it. And good luck to everybody in the Maiden. We'll catch you next week.